Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, we're going to learn all about pediatric sports medicine with a nationally known expert. Her incredible journey just ahead.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Okay, pediatric sports medicine. You've heard of it before, but we're going to get a deep dive right now with Dr. Cordelia Carter. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you were telling me before we started rolling that it's a relatively new field. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When did it start?
I don't think I could tell you an origin date. I guess what I would say is if you sort of think back, and well, if you're of my vintage, and you sort of think back and you busted your knee or busted your elbow when you were little, you saw your pediatrician, maybe an orthopedic surgeon, but you probably did not see a pediatric sports medicine specialist. And so I think an entire field of pediatric sports medicine has almost, I guess I'd use the word erupted in response to the changes in pediatric sports and the practice of pediatric sports, and frankly, what I would call the big business of pediatric sports. And so, kids are participating in sports from younger and younger ages at higher and higher levels, right? At more, with a lot more, I'm going to say vim and vigor, but it's, it's a lot more intense, right? We're asking a lot more of kids from younger and younger ages. We're asking them to specialize in sports early. We've got a lot of data that tells us that's not the best thing, actually. And ultimately, it's not the best thing for them. It's not the best thing for their bodies. But what's interesting is it's really not the best thing for performance. And if the ultimate goal is sort of longevity and excellence, then that may not be, for many kids, the path, because it results in broken bodies. And so, and there I got us circuitously back to why do we need pediatric sports medicine doctors? And it's because of how pediatric sports is done.
Okay, so you have a little one at home. How old is she?
It's a girl.
It's a girl.
She's 10 months old.
Okay, when she's old enough to play sports, are you going to encourage her to join the chess club?
That's a great question, because I will also disclose my husband is a pediatric sports surgeon too. So what's funny is the very first thing I signed her up for it's called My Gym, which we love. So I take her to the gym a couple times a week, but he has already said she is not doing gymnastics. And it's not, which I don't disagree with. So I don't tell him about the trampoline, but
he'll never watch this.
But because that's one of the biggest offenders, right? Like if you were to say to yourself, well, what are sports where I can think of an example of somebody specializing early? I know that there's a culture of pushing through pain. And we almost glorify it, right? Like gymnastics is one you would think of. And we see so many repetitive overuse injuries, elbows, knees, the gamut.
So if you had to pick like a top 3 most dangerous sports to compete in for a kid, what would your top 3 be?
I'm going to backtrack.
Okay.
Because I just said, we do gymnastics, right? Because the flip side is, because I really don't, my ultimate message would be physical activity and sports participation is so great for kids, and everybody should find a way to participate that is fun and enjoyable to them, right? And if gymnastics is that for you, then that's your thing. Sure. So that said, you want like the dirty 3 list.
Yep.
So
yes, exactly.
Gymnastics is a tough one. I would say baseball, actually, especially if you are that as a young kid, that pitcher-catcher combination, right? Mm-hmm. They're the ones who throw the most. It's why we have, pitch counts in place. There's a lot of data that tells us, you go above a certain number of pitches in a week or in a month without enough rest, you end up with elbow and shoulder problems. So I might actually stop at 2. Those are two of the worst, I would say. And then it's sort of like, everybody. I actually think a lot of us took this lesson from the COVID epidemic, which is like you sort of figure out what your risk tolerance is, right? And that's going to be different for every person and every family. But if you come from a place that like really loves football, your risk tolerance might be a little bit higher. Than from a place that says, I don't understand that that's not my culture. Why would I ever allow my kid to play that? And so, And so I just think that's different. I think the best thing you can do is to arm yourself with the knowledge about what the risks are, is to make sure your coaches and everybody that's participating and taking care of your kids is also up to date on the best safety protocols, what's the best equipment, and go from there, right? Sure. I mean, I think as much as we'd like to wrap our kids in bubble wrap all the time, it's not best for them, frankly, right?
I want them to get to know your why. So you were telling me just before the show started that when you were a little girl, you remember putting the stethoscope, the toy stethoscope on your dad's chest. So you've always been fascinated with medicine. I can't tell you why that is. I wanted to be a doctor from the time I was a really little girl. I wanted to be a pediatrician, although I wonder if that's because that's the only kind of doctor I knew, right? Because I had a pediatrician. I always wanted to help people. Sure. And then as you're climbing the ranks of your profession, I want to give you a chance to kind of just recite your resume. Like, what are some of the highlights of your career so far?
So far. Well, honestly, the resume is just a lot of school. So I went to Yale for college. I played field hockey in college. I was an academic All-American field hockey player. I still, most of us don't play field hockey anymore, but we still run together and do stuff together. And they're still, my teammates are some of my best friends. Then I took a couple years off, actually. I was a middle school science teacher at the American School in Tokyo.
Cool.
Yeah, that was really fun, actually. That was some of the best years of my life, or one of the best years of my life, I would say. Then 90-degree turn. I did neuroscience research on transgenic mice brains.
Wow. That is a right turn.
For a year at Massachusetts General Hospital. We were looking for a cure for Alzheimer's.
Oh, wow.
I think some of that stuff is just starting to come to market now. And then I went back to Yale for medical school. I loved it at Yale, plus it's easy to spell. And then, again, I went in thinking I'd be just a pediatrician. And then I realized I really like to do hands-on stuff. And so I was really thinking about surgery, realized I could combine the two in pediatric surgery. And then orthopedics just tends to, a lot of people who played sports tend to sort of navigate towards that field. So pediatric orthopedic surgery and then sports kind of made sense to me. Wow. So after residency at Columbia and fellowship at USC, and then a second fellowship at Harvard. Then I was 80 years old, and I was finally a doctor.
You look like you're 23, so I don't know how you got all that in. Let's talk about what your drive is now. So you're still a young lady. You got a lot of time left. What do you want to do with the rest of your life?
Oh, great question. I recently blew up my life. I'd been a professor of orthopedic surgery at Yale. I was a professor an associate professor of orthopedic surgery at NYU. And then I realized I was living to work, right, instead of working to live. And so I got married and moved to Texas, where my husband is from, and quit my job and had a baby. And so now I'm just figuring out the next chapter.
That's cool. No, yeah. I think you're probably living your best life. So in the final minute or two, I know your 10-month-old will watch this one day. What message do you want to give to your 10-year-old when she is old enough to understand this message?
Wow. That was too hard of a question. You said
no.
Ask me any hard questions. I think.
Like, what have you learned on the planet that you'd love to share with your child?
I think, I already said this once today. I think one of the best lessons that I've learned is like the problem is you always think you have time, right? So don't. I think, work to live.
Yes.
I think.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's powerful. You've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much. We're going to have you back again soon. That's it for now. We'll see you next time.